This is the best Solar Titan build. This build is easy to use and it's extremely powerful. We're combining the exotic Precious Scars with the powerhouse Polaris Lance to get something that gives us free restoration and the ability to deal huge amounts of damage. If you guys need an easy build to use to take inside of hard or difficult content, especially if you're a Titan main, then this is the build you need to be using. Let's jump straight into it. The first exotic of this build will be Precious Scars, and Precious Scars is what ties this build together. We're going to be able to generate unlimited health regen just because of this exotic, and this exotic is going to give us the exotic trait Kitsugi. Final blows from weapons with a damage type matching your subclass generate a burst of healing around you that grants allies restoration as well as granting yourself restoration. After reviving or being revived, you gain an aura that provides overshields to you and nearby allies. So what that means is, if you're on a solar subclass, then you need to be using a solar weapon to deal final blows. If you're on a void subclass, then vice versa, use a void weapon to deal those final blows. No matter what subclass you are on, if you match that same archetype with your weapon, it's going to grant you restoration. So this build can be taken into Arc, Void, and even Strand. That's what's going to make this build very versatile, but we're going to be sticking with our solar subclass. We have a lot of seasonal artifact mods that tie in with our solar subclass. But with this exotic, we're going to be able to gain unlimited restoration. Anytime you deal damage and kill enemies with a weapon that matches your subclass, aka a solar weapon for this build in particular, we're going to be granting ourselves restoration. And once we have that restoration, I'm going to show you guys how we're going to extend the duration and regen it infinitively. So you should always have healing, and you never have to worry about healing with this build. It's so easy to use that a lot of people tend to overlook this build, but this build is just an easy build to use just because all we need to do is get kills and we have unlimited healing. Get more kills and we're going to extend our restoration, and we're going to extend that timer every single time we gain kills. The next exotic we have is the powerhouse Polaris Lance. With the artifact mods you gained this season, the Polaris Lance just skyrocketed on the exotic tier list to become now one of the best exotics you should be using, especially for difficult content. So Polaris Lance is just going to grant us the ability to scorch lots of enemies very quickly. The key things for this build I want to focus on will be our subclass setup so we can extend that restoration, and that's why we are using a solo subclass with Precious Scars. I'm going to show you guys exactly how to extend the timer and refresh the timer as well. So the jump inside of our solar subclass, the super is completely up to you, and our abilities can change, so the abilities do not matter at all. You can pick up an extra healing grenade if you need to heal yourself in sticky situations, but your grenade can be swapped out for pretty much anything at this point. The grenade we're choosing for this build will be Fusion Grenade, and the two aspects we want will be Roaring Flames. So final blows with our solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of our abilities. Since this isn't an ability style build, Roaring Flames will increase our damage of our grenade, but we're not going to be spamming any of our abilities, so Roaring Flames can be swapped out. The next thing we do have is Soul Invictus, and Soul Invictus makes sure that anytime we defeat an enemy with our grenade or our hammer strike, it's going to spawn a sunspot, and those sunspots you create will grant you restoration, but we already have a way to consistently proc restoration with Precious. So the main things we want to focus on for our aspects is just the ability to grant us 2 fragment slots. Once you have Precious Scars, you can use any fragments and this build will still work perfectly fine. Now to dive into our fragments, this is what we need to focus on so Precious Scars can truly shine on our solar subclass. The first thing we have is Ember of Empyrean. Anytime we gain a kill, this is going to refresh the duration of restoration. So this is how we're able to keep restoration active, by just getting more kills with our Polaris Lance. This is just going to refresh our timer every single time we get a kill. Once you combine Ember of Empyrean with Ember of Solace will make sure that our duration is now longer, and we can gain restoration for up to 14 seconds just by having Ember. Even when we fail to get a kill, once we do get a kill, it's going to reproc our restoration, and that's how we're able to chain it back together. Once you have Ember of Empyrean, this is how we're going to refresh our timer. And the reason we have it is because even with Precious Scars, it only grants you restoration momentarily, and you have no way of extending that duration unless you gain more kills. And without Ember of Empyrean, you only gain restoration for 2 seconds with Precious Scars, but once you have Ember of Empyrean, you're able to refresh the duration and keep chaining restoration and keep it active the entire time throughout any content. The next fragment we do have is Ember of Char, so our solar ignitions will spread scorch to afflicted targets. This works well with Polaris lands, but this can always be swapped out for any other fragment you need for the build. And the last thing we do have is Ember of Ashes, so we can apply more scorch stacks to targets, especially when combined with Polaris lands. This is how we're able to chain all of our solar ignitions completely across the board. The last thing I'm going to touch on in this build will just be the stats we want to build into. Of course, the number one stat we need will be resilience. We need that 30% damage reductions to tank a lot of damage, so resilience is going to be our first stat. And then the next stat we build into will be discipline, only because we want to be able to throw our grenade as much as possible, even though this is not an ability spam build. However, if you have the stats to get double 100s, or you have stats left over after getting 100 resilience, the next stat I would prioritize would just be your discipline, just in case you want to pick up a healing grenade or fusion grenade or any other grenade you need for the content you're doing. And the last stat we're running into would just be our recovery. Since we're not really using our hammer strike, there's no real reason to build inside of our melee. Unless you are using your hammer strike, then you want to build inside of your melee. But that covers everything we need for this build. We covered the stats and we covered our subclass setups. As far as the mod systems that we are using, we're not using any mods in particular. The only mods we're using in this build will be Solar Siphon to generate orbs of power, and we're going to combine that with Solar Surge on our legs, just so our Polaris lands can deal huge amounts of damage. The other mods I am using will be the standard mods I rock in every other build, which would be my regular damage resist mods, 1 harmonic damage resistance, 1 void damage resistance, combined with a concussive dampener. On my gauntlets, I'm just using double solar reloader just to reload my Polaris lands faster. And then for our Titan mark, we're using time dilation to extend the timer combined with powerful attraction. And that's it. All the mods I run are pretty standard. I don't do anything crazy with the armor mod system. I just make sure I am spawning orbs of power, so the most important thing to keep in mind will be Solar Siphon. If you guys like the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.